All right. Today is Monday, July 28th, 2025. I am the interviewer Amy Moritz with Kathleen Sweet at the Hansa Workspace in downtown Buffalo. Kathleen played 4 sports at Clarence High School, but basketball was where she made the most impact. She led the Clarence girls basketball team to 4 straight Section 6 titles and was named the most valuable player at the 1982 New York State basketball tournament. She went on to play at Boston College, graduating in 1987 with 1,006 career points and 597 career rebounds. As team captain during her senior season, she played a key role as the Eagles reached their first Big East championship game during the 1987 conference tournament. She went on to graduate from the Villanova University Charles Widger School of Law in 1990. She currently is president of the New York State Bar Association, has been inducted into the Boston College Varsity Club Hall of Fame in 2004, and is a member of the 2025 class of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. Kathleen, thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So I start with, tell me about a time that you first remember falling in love with sports.
So my family was always engaged in watching sports. We watched the Red Sox, we watched the Celtics. None of us were tennis players, but we watched Wimbledon, the U.S. Open. So that was a big part of my family life, engaging in watching sports. But personally, I was signed up for House League soccer in Clarence, where there was no other house league at the time, I don't believe, and there were only 3 girls in the league. And it was fun. It was an opportunity to, compete and develop skills and have fun and have teammates. And that was probably the first time that I caught the bug to play sports.
So you were playing the house league, was it a boys league mostly? And then there were you and a couple other girls playing on it?
Correct.
So were there opportunities for girls what were those opportunities to play for girls in Clarence when you were growing up?
So there was no girls league. And I don't think I think my mother signed me up for junior girls softball at the earliest opportunity, but I think soccer came first that year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what was it like playing with the guys?
So they were my classmates and we were little kids, so it was no big deal.
Yeah. Then talk about at Clarence, you're a multi-sport athlete. So I want to make sure you have it right. Soccer, volleyball, field hockey, basketball?
And field hockey was certainly not where I excelled. So that's my hesitation. I mean, I was on the team.
You were on the team?
And I played and I was a starter. We weren't very good, but it was what my friends were doing. And as every season changed, different ones of my friends excelled in the sport we did. We weren't all good at everything. And field hockey is probably where I would say I shined less.
And so what was it like being a multi-sport athlete for you? Was that, at the time, that was what people who played sports did too, right?
Yes, that is what we did. We played whatever sport was in season, and we just went from one thing to the next. And if we made the playoffs of the season we were in, that meant we had to do less of the preseason training for the next sport. And there were times when we went far enough in basketball that we would show up, our basketball teammates would show up for soccer and unfairly waltz back into our starting positions, having not done much of the preseason training. It was just what we did. We went from sport to sport to sport, and then the summer there was softball.
And how did you feel at Clarence when you were, if you go back to high school, and sometimes what you remember is different from when you were there, but how did you feel girls' sports were treated when you were playing there?
So I have a better perspective about it now with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, you don't understand and don't appreciate, you don't have any perspective on it, so you go through what you go through, and I don't mean it to sound like it was suffering. It wasn't. It was fantastic. But I now look back on the fact that, for example, we were about to play in the state tournament, but boys baseball was about to start practicing, so they had their spring practices, and of course the boys baseball team had to have their spring practices in the main gym. And so we were going to the state tournament, but for practice after sectionals, we would take a bus to Clarence Center Elementary School, where we practiced in, a really small gym that was really the cafetorium, where there's a stage at one end, and the top of the key is about 5 feet from mid-court.
Not ideal.
Again, our coaches made the best of it. If they complained, they didn't let us in on it. And they were great. And they were wonderful, wonderful coaches.
Yeah, and obviously you guys went far too, and playing in the state tournament and that. What was that? What were the state tournaments like? What was that experience like for you to be playing that deep into the postseason?
So I'm trying to think back. So my sophomore year, I think we may have lost in the Far West Regional in Rochester. And then my junior year was the year we went to the final and lost in the final by 2 or 3 points. And then my senior year, we lost in the semifinal. We played against amazing athletes. Felicia Leggett, Shelley Pennefeather, phenomenal, athletes, not just of their time in the history of women's sports in the state. They were among the very best.
Mm-hmm. Was there a time that basketball that became your sport? Like that was where you knew that was for you?
Well, sure, but I loved it, but it was also the sport that someone my height was blessed to have more opportunities than others. And so it was good that I also loved it, but I was also steered in that direction more than in others. Field hockey was not a sport where anyone saw much potential for me.
But volleyball could,
volleyball was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I was okay at volleyball. Basketball certainly was where I had more potential and I enjoyed it more.
And I mean, steered in that way, but is there anything about basketball that, besides the fact that you're tall, so that made it right, but that you loved about that sport?
I love the fluid nature of the game. The fact that of course there's dead balls and timeouts and things like that, but the nature of a play is not stoppage, serve, play, point. There's the back and forth, and there's the need to respond in a second with whether it's skill or judgment to the developing circumstances, and no play is the same. You could watch 100,000 basketball games and none of them will be exact replicas of each other.
As you're playing in high school, how aware were you? I want to talk about the recruiting process and going to Boston College. So at the time, how aware were you of scholarship opportunities and that type of life for basketball after high school?
It was part of what people made sure I was aware was available for me. At the same time, I didn't have an appreciation again until much later how novel it was for folks, girls in particular, to have full scholarship opportunities like I had, and to be recruited by great schools, D1 schools, academic powerhouses, athletic powerhouses, places all over the country. Like a lot of student athletes, I kept a shoebox with all the letters, and that got pitched when eventually. But it was it was a little testament to the work you put in to see that people are interested in you as an athlete.
And what was that process like?
Well, you go to, or at least I did, I went to some out-of-town basketball camps. There was no AAU back then. There were no extracurricular teams. No one had, I shouldn't say no one, very few people, and I certainly didn't have an individual trainer or an agent or anything like that. I would go to the Kathy Rush camps in the Poconos. I went to an all-star camp at St. Mary's in Indiana, not far from Notre Dame, which was an eye-opening experience because you're playing with the best players from all over the country, and that is humbling because you think, oh my gosh, I'm Kathy Sweet, and I'm, the ECIC, first team, blah, blah, blah. And you go to a camp where there's the best girls from all the country, and you realize that there are levels. There are levels to everything. And there were phenomenal basketball players, people that went on to play for the Olympics and things like that. So you get exposure in that context at these camps. And then through what there was of media attention on high school girls sports back then, which was meager but appreciated. Courier Express was one of the newspapers in Buffalo that gave girls sports not equal attention but more attention. And then you were allowed back then, I don't know if the rules are different now, but you were allowed 5 visits to schools, and my parents knew they weren't going to allow me to go west of the Mississippi or south of the Mason-Dixon line, not for any political reason, just because they wanted me closer. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Boston College, Northwestern, Penn State, trying to think where else. I'm losing track, old age. But I loved Boston College. I loved Boston, and mostly I loved the girls that were my hosts, and I felt comfortable with them. And I didn't want to go to a school with sororities or fraternities. For some reason, I had a little bias against that. And so when I went on my visits to schools, and you'd think, well, didn't you look it up? Didn't you know? What about the website? There were no websites back then. There was no internet back then. And so when I went to schools, I just, like everyone should, when you go to a school, if you have a good feel there and you think it's a good fit, that's where you wind up.
So you mentioned a little bit, so what about Boston College then that put them over the top for you?
In addition to how welcomed and comfortable I felt with the girls on the team who hosted me for my official visit, it had strong academics, still has very strong academics, and it was a program that was truly just beginning. There were women on the team who were seniors when I was a freshman who were not full scholarship athletes because that was not yet available when they were quote unquote recruited. And so myself and the other freshmen, we were only the second or third class of full scholarship athletes at Boston College. And our coach worked her butt off to make sure that we got as much as we could out of the university, out of being members of the Big East. But it wasn't easy. She fought hard to make sure that we were treated with not exactly equity, but as close as she could achieve to equity.
Right. Now, it could also just be age because you are more aware when you're in college, right, than when you're in high school. But you mentioned in high school, your coaches may have been fighting for you, but you guys didn't really see it. They were kind of just trying to, take care of you. But it sounds like in college, you became more aware of some of those battles.
A little bit. And then after college, my college coach wound up, I don't know if this is it's a matter of public record in the internet, but she wound up bringing a lawsuit against Boston College after she was discriminated against at least according to her lawsuit. For example, we just didn't have access to the facilities that the men did. We didn't have access to the funding that the men did. We didn't have, and I'm sure that's still the case at many, many, many schools. But she fought for us, and she took issue with that. And even after her career ended at Boston College, she was still carrying the flag for women's sports, and I admire her greatly for that.
Talk about your experience at Boston College and tell me about both basketball and the academic side too.
Well, one thing I was committed to was having as much as possible of a regular life. And so I wanted to and eventually did live with non-athletes my last 3 years. And that was an incredibly valuable and important part of my experience in college. At the same time, I remain very close to this day with my teammates. I would say as much as I remember some things about games and experiences, whether it's practice or in actual games, the relationships, the spending time together, the bus rides, the car rides, the time spent in airports, just being around each other. We were ridiculous goofballs, and the fact that coaches and of college athletes, their careers depend on the whims and behavior of 18, 19, 20-year-old girls is really something, given how we behaved back then. We were just silly, Yeah.
And I think that still is today. I think that's refreshing when you see people who are like, they're clearly enjoying themselves.
Yeah,
right.
We definitely did. Yeah. I thought before I chose Boston College, I thought about going to, this is going to sound obnoxious, an Ivy League school, because I had good enough grades not to get in on my own, but as a chosen athlete, I would have and could have been able to play for an Ivy League school. And I remember thinking one time when one of my teammates and I were walking through the football stadium to where we were about to do our weight training or our interval training or whatever, and the Harvard field hockey team was stretching and warming up against, getting ready for a game against Boston College. And they were being as silly and youthful as we were, after games, between games. But this was right before a game. And my teammate, Rita, at the time said, "Do you ever think that that's what it's all about?" And I said, "Maybe, but I wouldn't trade it at this point, I really wouldn't." And so I think people make a choice for what is important to them. And you really can't look back and think, "Oh, I should have done that," or "I could have done that." In the same vein, I could have ridden the bench at a top 10 basketball school. Maybe that would have been a valuable and wonderful experience in a different way. So I think Boston College gave me the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. And then academically, at Boston College, challenging, great academic, challenging school. Was it when you were at Boston College that the legal profession, or did you already go in thinking? How did that kind of evolve for you?
So I started pre-med, and the irony is that now that my career is defending doctors and medical malpractice actions, I feel like, again, I got the best of both worlds. I never had to take organic chemistry and succeed at that. And yet I get to represent physicians in all different areas of practice. So I started pre-med and realized within a year or shortly after my first year that was, not what I wanted to do, and spent my sophomore year undeclared. And I think it was at the beginning of my junior year that our coach came to me when we were shooting free throws one day and said, "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that you have the best GPA on the team. The bad news is you're going to be academically ineligible unless you choose a major." And so I chose a pre-law major, and the rest is, history. And then I went on to law school.
Right. And before we started recording, you were telling me about a paper or research that you did at Boston College, right?
Yeah. So I triangulated out what I would have to do to meet all the criteria without going to summer school and have the core requirements that would be necessary to apply successfully to law school. And at Boston College, there was a sociology honors program, and so I enrolled in that. And my senior thesis was about the impact of Title IX on coaches of women athletes, and in particular, women's basketball, collegiate sports. So my advisor for that, Michael Malik, wound up publishing the paper that he and I wound up doing together at an international sociology conference. And it was interesting. And as we talked before we started, the impetus for that was my sense that even in the Big East, from the time I was recruited to the time that I was going to graduate, there had been a shift in the number of female coaches versus male coaches in the Big East, from a predominant majority of women coaches to a majority of male coaches, just in that very short time. And I think had to do with the impact of Title IX on coaches, making opportunities more economically viable.
Right, yeah, it was, you weren't just getting a stipend to coach women's basketball now. You were getting a salary and
you could make a career out of it.
Yes, yeah. Did you also, we'll talk about Title IX a little bit later, but also, so you, obviously you're very aware of Title IX because you do some undergraduate research on it. As you are looking at law school then, did it also, like your whole, with basketball and then also with originally pre-med and then with law school, I mean, that was one of the impetus for looking at Title IX in the first place, was to open up those opportunities for women when they weren't getting that.
I kind of toyed with the idea of pursuing a career with the NCAA or something in the, the conference athletic field. But my interest led me elsewhere. Right.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking about not so much your career interest, but the fact that just getting into law school, right,
sure.
and having that
Mm-hmm.
opportunity is something else that Title IX helped open up for you.
Oh yeah, I can look back and connect the dots to basketball and women's sporting opportunities, and even as a child, the development process for me as a person and as an athlete to just about everything that I've accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Did you play in Empire State Games?
I did.
As a, tell me about that experience. Was it Scholastic, Collegiate?
So I played in the open division. Okay. I learned about it really late as to when the tryouts were going to be for Scholastic, and I had missed the tryouts. I was crushed. I remember being just devastated that I had missed the tryouts. And so I tried out for volleyball, and I almost made the volleyball team. And the volleyball coach at the time said, well, if anything goes wrong with basketball next year, you can play volleyball. But then I was, maniacal about making sure that I got to the tryouts. They were in Rochester. The coaches were Rochester coaches at the time. And again, no internet. So it wasn't like it was something that was posted or available or emailed. And so then I played on the open women's basketball team for our Western district and our Western region. And that was huge for me. It's a real sense of accomplishment. If any athlete who played in the Empire State Games tells you they didn't love the day they got their Empire gear, they're lying to you. Getting those jackets and getting your Western uniforms was a huge validation of the work you had put in to make those teams.
I've heard so many stories about those sweatsuits. Like everyone just wanted that Empire State Game. So like that was a milestone. That was a real big marker.
It was, yeah. And there was, they took 10 players on a team, and that was that. And so it was an accomplishment. And we had phenomenal coaches: Sister Maria Perez, Mike Rappel, Sal Buscaglia, and I remember we played against just again phenomenal athletes: Felicia Leggett. Lots of players from downstate, other regions, but our team was stacked. We had probably the best players in the country at the time: Yvette Angel, Dorothy Jones, Tony Webb, Gina Castelli. Outstanding players from Canisius, Carhan, Laura Hughes, who was the all-time leading scorer for high school basketball, who went to Penn State. She was on our team. Linda Wilson, a very underrated basketball player from Hamburg. Maria Kramovich from Canisius. We really had a phenomenal team and great coaches, and we won gold at, I think, a couple times. I know you'd think I would know for sure. Those medals are, my prized possessions, but what years we earned them and who was exactly on which team at which time, I don't know.
The recruiting letters have gone, but the medals, they will always stay.
The medals remain, yeah.
You just rattled off like amazing women in basketball, like in this area. How much, even when you were in high school, I know you weren't in the Empire State, but how much did you know about the other women or the other girls growing up? And
occasionally there would be, something in the Courier Express about a girl from a young woman playing college sports or, in a different league. So I knew about Laura Hughes just from what I saw in the paper. And then I got to meet her and play on the same team with her. And her family is a basketball dynasty now in Franklinville, and her daughters are also all Division I athletes, as far as I know. There wasn't the amount or ease of communications or media about women's sports.
So, like you mentioned, like there was no internet or email that you would know about tryouts. So, it almost seems like you had to know the right people just to know about what the opportunities were too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And one bad failed experience with that led to me, having to be, and it was a phone call game, or get your coaches to call the coaches, or find out, where is it going to be, and there would be a little 2-line notice at the bottom of the sports section after the box scores about where there were going to be tryouts for whatever, swimming, field hockey, basketball, volleyball, softball for Empires. You missed it in the old-fashioned newspaper hard copy. That was that.
There was no, nothing else. There was no, and what was that then when you were playing on Empires and you were playing in the open division and with those other women? What was that experience like? Because you've got so many amazing women, but also different backgrounds from different coaches and different stories. What was that like to play on those teams?
It was an enormous influence on me to be around people who came from different upbringings, different ethnic backgrounds, and different college sports experiences. And very humbling when Sal Biscaglia was our coach. We had, Yvette, Tony, and DJ, and to say that they could full court press with anybody in the country would be an understatement. They were extremely gifted. And those were not times when I would be in the game. I was not known for speed and quickness. And so those were fun times. And it's fun to be on the bench and cheering on tremendous teammates. And we have stayed in touch, and the Empire State Games has kind of been a through line in our lives of staying aware of each other. Every once in a while we'll get together. Several of the people that I mentioned are in the Hall of Fame, not only for their high schools, their colleges, but also either for coaching or playing in the Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. That's it is quite a through line. What was it? I mean, like you mentioned, like those were the times you were not in the game when they were full court pressing. But you go from, and maybe it's different at the college level, because you I'm sure that there's some humbling at the college level, or realization. You had mentioned even at some of the camps that you're like, okay, there's different levels. But when you go to a team that's basically an all-star team, that can be a different dynamic, right? When you are sitting on the bench, when normally you would be playing. Yeah,
I think that it's a testament to the coaches that it's understood that everyone has a role, and you're going to be accountable to the team to play your role and put your egos aside, put your own individual successes aside. Everyone who's on this team is a star wherever they came from or wherever they play in college. And that's just kind of the level of respect that we had for each other and still have for each other.
You had mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about how, sports and athletics translate into like your, career. But are there times when that background, the athletic background, you feel has helped you in your either education pursuits for your law degree, or then in your career then as a lawyer?
I would say probably more with regard to my career. I have a pretty strong sense of accountability to the people around me, whether I'm on the team or leading the team. I also feel that I and the people around me are resilient, that we have to be as a team sport player. You have to recover from failure, if not right away for the next play, then pretty soon for the next game. And as a litigator, not everything's going to go your way. Either right in the moment when the witness doesn't answer the question you think the way they were going to answer it or in the context of a trial. So I would say being able to respond to adversity, be resilient, and yet persevere and do the work, put in the necessary hours to succeed.
Is it? I mean, we always hear about, or we hear the stats about women who are CEOs, women who are achievers who've played sports, and that sounds like something that would not that surprise you in any way.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I don't know those stats. I've heard tell about that, but for example, Kathy Engelbert is the commissioner of the WNBA. She was the CEO of a top 5 accounting firm, and she was a college athlete. Doesn't surprise me at all.
What is it do you think about college athletics? Do you think it's anything specific for women, or do you think just college athletics in general, or being on a team in general?
Can't speak to what it would be like for a male athlete. I'm sure there are male athletes who succeed for some of the same reasons that women do, but I would say that the opportunities to turn pro for women were virtually non-existent 30 years ago. And so your talents, whether it's leadership or work ethic or skill, judgment, whatever it is, had to be channeled into something other than your sport because your sport was over.
It was done. You had mentioned that you still keep in touch with people, both from Boston College and from Empires. Mm-hmm. How important are those relationships? Have those relationships been to you over the years?
We've come in and out of each other's lives over the years, not for any interpersonal reasons. It's just people get busy, people have families, their careers take them here or there, but it's always a blast to get together, and it's just fun to connect, be together. I savor those relationships as among the most important in my life.
Coming up this fall in 2025, you'll be officially inducted into the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. When you heard the news, what was your reaction to that?
It's incredibly humbling, and I would say validating, except that validating makes it sound like I always thought I should be and that I'm therefore validated. It was never something that I thought would come my way. And I've been a cheerleader for my Empire State Games teammates who have been inducted before me, and just so proud to be among them now. Mm-hmm.
What does Title IX mean to you?
Well, that's a question that could probably result in a term paper or a lot longer answer. In all sincerity, I think I would have a very different life without it.
How so?
The opportunities that it provided to me as a child, in high school and college, those shaped me. And without Title IX, I was one of the early beneficiaries, and of course I didn't know it at the time. But just, girls that were born 10 years before me didn't have those opportunities. And the girls that were born 10 years after me had an explosion of additional opportunities. And the girls born 10 years after them are the stars of the WNBA, and have enormous opportunities in every sport. So I mean it most sincerely when I say that it really shaped me. You don't know how your life would have gone otherwise. You don't get to see the path not taken, but the path that was opened to me because of Title IX has been wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Where did you find the most support?
Well, my parents, my coaches, my sisters.
Mm-hmm. And then, last question. I always like to ask people a favorite memory of playing. And I know you talked about you don't remember games, and a lot of people don't. But what's a memory or some of your favorite memories about playing?
Well, one that I did have to give this some thought. One that comes to mind is we had an up and down season, my senior year. My junior year, we had probably our best year at Boston College. And then my senior year, we had a very up and down season, and we had lost to Providence, one of our, rivals, twice by healthy margins. And we were playing them in the semifinal of the Big East tournament, and we wound up beating them by 1. And it was just this incredible sense of release that we had finally, we'd finally beaten our nemesis that had, beaten us twice before. We played in the championship game where we lost to Villanova for like the 10th time in a row. But we made it to the championship game. And on the team for Providence at the time, their star point guard was none other than Doris Sable, now Doris Burke. And she has certainly done well for herself. And I followed her career, and I'm very proud to have been a part of the Big East at the same time she was.
All right. Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.